Hey, can you put the house under my name? I'll inherit it when mom passes away, so we might as well change it now, right? This nonchalant proposal comes from my son. In his hand, he holds the property registration documents for a newly purchased 400-yard house. Fluttering them as he looks at me. Well, about that house. Enough of that, just get on with the procedures, will you? My son, grinning foolishly, has his arm around his wife's shoulder and is in a good mood. His wife, too, is grinning broadly. We can live here better than your elderly mother-in-law who doesn't have long left. We'll let you live with us and your grandchild, so be grateful. Unsolicited, they say this as if they are doing us a favor, both laughing foolishly. The two of them don't listen at all, treating my explanations about the property as lies. Instead, Tyler points to the calendar and laughs. We're moving in next week. Get ready to unpack for us. At those words, I had to suppress a laugh. My name is Aileen. I am 60 years old this year and had been working part-time until a few years ago. However, when my real father was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I quit my job to take care of him, and now I live with him in my childhood home. My husband, Scott, who is 3 years older than me, has ended up mostly living alone at our house because I moved back to my parents. Considering he is about to retire and not wanting to burden my sick father, Scott decided to stay at our house. Scott, whom I met 40 years ago, is very kind. He helps with household chores, which is rare for men of his generation, and has always saved for our retirement. However, Scott has one flaw. He spoils our son too much. I married Scott when I was 20. We had a happy marriage, but couldn't have children for many years. After 10 years of hospital visits, we finally had a son. I understand the desire to grant every wish of a long-awaited child. But raising a child by indulging every whim only creates a spoiled child. Toys, candy, pocket money, Scott was always too lenient with our son. Of course, we had many discussions as a couple. And I tried to convince him that indulging our son was not truly beneficial for him. Each time, Scott would apologize with a regretful face, promising to change starting tomorrow. But his resolve was only in his words. In the end, he always melted before our son's requests and bought him whatever he wanted. I tried to balance Scott's leniency by being strict myself. Play with toys only after homework is done, no eating a lot of candy before dinner. No more pocket money until next month if it's all spent. These were simple rules, but our son probably found them uninteresting. He went through rebellious and teenage phases, but in his eyes, his dad was the Superman who granted every wish, and I became the nagging mother. When our son was in high school, he started buying ready-made meals and bread on the way home. Considering the appetite of a high school boy, I didn't stop him. But at least I tried to provide balanced meals with more vegetables at home. Then one day, our son slammed the desk and shouted, "Hey, old woman, why do you only serve greens every day? Let me eat meat." While I was taken aback by being called an old woman to my face, my husband firmly grabbed our son's shoulder. "What kind of way is that to speak? Who do you think you are?" Apparently shocked by being yelled at by his usually indulgent father, our son muttered an apology to me in a disappearing voice. After that, our son's rebellious phase seemed to calm down a bit. He started to focus on his studies, but unfortunately, he was rejected by his school of choice. He applied to several and was accepted to a university far away. So he prepared to move and entered the dormitory, and we attended his entrance ceremony. That was the last memory of the three of us as a family. Since entering university, our son stopped coming home. It seems the city is exciting. Whenever I contact him, he just says, "I'm busy with studies." Honestly, I even thought he might be just playing around. But we've been on edge because it's not right to monitor a college student's every move. Even when we say we'll visit, he always says it's impossible, and if we go without telling him, he doesn't even come home after waiting all night. In the end, we couldn't meet our son. And the only times he came home were during the Christmas holidays in the first 2 years. Other than that, he only contacted us when he needed more money for his allowance. Perhaps his studies paid off, as after graduation he managed to get a job at a fairly large company. Finally, our son, who had returned from the student dorm, said he needed money to buy the necessary appliances as he was moving close to his company. It was not just a job announcement, but also a request for money, though we gave him the money as a graduation and employment gift. However, Tyler quit the big company he had joined after just 2 weeks. The women are ugly. I don't want to work surrounded by monsters with faces below 5 points. I just couldn't accept that my son really quit for such a ridiculous reason. What are you going to a company for? It's shameful to rate people's faces selfishly and then quit for such a reason.
Ah.
Yes, too bad, huh? You thought your son was going to make big bucks at a major company? Aren't you embarrassed to be relying on your son's earnings? My son, who was smirking, seemed like a completely different person. His way of speaking and thinking had become just like those of his online friends. But hey, I still have my new grad card. I'll find a company with cuter girls. That said, Tyler was diligent about job hunting and got hired often. He was originally serious and sociable. Getting hired was relatively easy, but staying was difficult. Tyler had never stayed in the same job for more than 2 years. Reasons like the female employees not being cute enough, no beautiful single female employees, having colleagues who were more capable than him, or disliking being treated like a child by his boss. From my perspective, these were unbelievable reasons to quit easily. No matter how many times I tried to persuade him, it didn't resonate. And I was completely exhausted and stopped contacting my son. After all, once a child is an adult, they must take responsibility for their own life. Likewise, Tyler stopped contacting us unless he needed money. And when I stopped giving him money, the contacts just stopped. When we stopped bringing up our son's name, our 27-year-old son suddenly appeared at our house. And he brought a pregnant woman with him. I got married. Hillary is pregnant now. Got married, when? Apparently, they had been married for a year. Neither my husband nor I had heard about it. And we could only look skeptical about why he chose this timing. Actually, I quit my job. Hillary needs to take maternity leave soon because it's time. And we're insecure about our finances, so. My son looked hesitant to say more, but when our eyes met, he grinned foolishly. The news of my son getting married and having a grandchild brought more feelings of resignation than joy. Again, it's about money. But I slowly shook my head. I'm sorry, but I can't help you financially. Grandpa is not well, and I'll be living at my parents' house for the foreseeable future. Your father will stay at our house, but not for long. My son choked up at my words. Actually, my father has cancer and is already in the terminal stage. He prefers to spend his last days at home rather than undergoing painful life-extending treatments. So I'm planning to move back to my parents' house alone. Thus, I made it clear beforehand that I couldn't support them at home or even Hillary's childbirth. Both Tyler and Hillary lowered their eyes heavily and conveyed their prayers for my father. I realized it was all an act or a plea to me when, less than a month later, I moved back to my parents' house, and my husband contacted me saying, "The son and his wife have been staying at our house all the time. It's hard because the grandchild keeps crying." It seems that after I left, my son and his wife settled into our house and made themselves comfortable. I had asked my husband to take care of Hillary and Max, thinking my son would be job hunting. But that was not the case. Having quit jobs for selfish reasons too many times, Tyler's resume was in terrible shape. And now that he's in his late 20s, his hire rate is quite low. Despite this, Tyler is not proactive in job hunting, only occasionally attending job interviews. Instead, he seems to only do short-term or day labor jobs. And he doesn't seem to give any of that money to Scott for living expenses or rent. On the contrary, he does as he pleases, using groceries and taking baths at will. Babies cry as part of their job, but Scott has become fed up with hearing the crying every night, which we never anticipated when we agreed to live together. Scott expressed his frustration. But the two only argue about how much money it takes to raise a child. And just keep taking pictures of the baby without showing any intention of contributing financially. There's nothing I can do anymore. I'd move there too. But if our son and his family came along, it would be too much trouble for Dad. I couldn't deny Scott's words. If those two were using our rent-free home as their base, they would likely follow us if we moved. Especially since they're always asking about my father's health. Or prying about renovations at my parents' home. After all, both our home and my parents' house are old, and considering the facilities around, they are not suitable for raising children. While I was worrying that this would definitely cause trouble, my father finally passed away. A few days after the relatives gathered for the funeral, we were discussing our future plans and sharing memories of my father when the topic of inheritance came up. For some reason, Tyler tried to join the discussion. Why is Tyler here? Today's meeting is supposed to be only for the heirs. What, I can't inherit anything? My brother's question left Tyler responding with a puzzled face. Since my father had not designated Tyler in his will to leave anything specifically to him, I had to tell him that it would be divided according to the law, which made him sigh heavily. He left without a greeting, not even closing the door behind him. What's with that attitude of his? I'm really sorry. I tried to soothe my angry brother, but I felt the same. It seemed Tyler was only interested in my father's inheritance. And as soon as he realized he had no right to it, he stopped asking about our family home or my father's assets. After discussions about the division of the inheritance were settled, a few days passed. When I returned home for the first time in a while, it had changed so much it seemed like someone else's house. Scott looked exhausted, and only my son, his wife, and their child were lively. But I was concerned because the grandchild looked too thin. Hey, isn't this child too skinny? Is everything okay? It's fine. The doctors say it's just because he's small. Well, I haven't been eating well, so maybe he's a bit undernourished. Hillary laughed as if it were someone else's problem, so I hurried to prepare a meal. Since she's not using formula milk and it's not yet time to start solid food, it's pointless if Hillary doesn't eat. I diligently planned meals because the grandchild was innocent. As a result, my son and his wife started to linger for the meals. They only talk about what they want to eat and what's good for breastfeeding, never offering to pay or showing gratitude. The only consolation was that the grandchild was getting plumper. I'm fed up with Tyler, who is supposed to be an adult but leaves all the housework to me. And Hillary, who takes it for granted as well. I've set up many discussions to express that it's a burden, but they only respond with emotional arguments about how happy it should be to live with their grandchild. I considered forcibly evicting them when I started thinking about moving out. And casually, Tyler looked around the house and laughed. Hasn't Dad been around lately? It's weird that Dad isn't here now that Mom is back. Hey, are you guys planning to divorce? It would be a problem for us if Mom leaves. I glared at Tyler, who was obviously looking down on us and laughing. Your father is just busy preparing to move and visiting our new neighbors. Anyway, what do you mean by it's a problem for you? How long do you plan to stay in this house? You're still job hunting, right? You need to find a job and a place soon, because it's a problem for us too. Despite having told him repeatedly, Tyler was shocked to be explicitly told to leave and just shifted his gaze around awkwardly. Sensing I couldn't let this moment pass, I pressed him further. And Tyler slammed the desk forcefully. You don't have to be so harsh. You don't understand how hard it is for me. It's only natural for parents to help their struggling son and grandchild, right? You never hold down a steady job, you live here without permission. Make me prepare meals and baths, even take care of the grandchild. And you don't contribute to living expenses. Do you really think it's natural for parents to support such a lifestyle? You need to start taking responsibility as an adult. Without a pause, as I countered, Tyler suddenly stood up and stormed out of the room, leaving heavy footsteps behind. I raised my voice at his retreating back. Your father and I will be selling this house and moving out in 6 months. You both better figure out what you're going to do by then. Perhaps surprised by my words, Tyler turned around with a start. But, pressed by my determination, he silently left the living room. Yet, come dinner time, he ate his meal with a frown, visibly angry. Which was just too much for me to handle. As Scott and I proceeded with the moving preparations, it seemed Tyler finally sensed our seriousness. Now, all of a sudden, he came to us in tears about how troubled he would be without a home. Talking about his job and income. But such pleas no longer touched my heart, I continued preparing emotionlessly. Then, on a day when we were nearly ready to move, Tyler and Hillary came up to me in unusually high spirits as I returned home. Mom, don't be so cold. Thanks for finding such a big house for us. What? Confused by what he meant, Tyler thrust some documents in front of me. It was a copy of the registration certificate for a 400-yard house. At that moment, seeing the document made my face turn red with anger. How do you have that? Did you break the lock and find it? Come on, that's not a big deal. But, when are we moving? A 400-yard house must be huge, right? Those documents had been stored in a drawer in my study. Not something that would ever be left in the living room. Despite my fear of Tyler entering the room, I had locked them in a cabinet with a key. Yet here they were in his hands. Rushing to my room, I found the drawer's lock brutally damaged, clearly forced open. A closer look revealed that other storages had been tampered with too, with drawers partially open and items I had put away scattered around. No matter that we lived together, this was utterly unforgivable. But Tyler just grinned foolishly in response to my shouting. You burglar. I've said it many times, but I can't live with you guys anymore. We are moving, but you can't live in that house. I absolutely refuse to live together after we move. Take care of your own lives. Come on, you're just saying that, right? This house is indeed too small for the 5 of us. Isn't that why you bought a bigger house? Talking like that, are you tsundere or something? Really, you shouldn't talk like that, it's not nice to your mother. But really, you are too reserved, mother. I repeatedly explained that the house was not meant for us to live in. But they wouldn't listen, asking why I would own such a property if it wasn't for living. The conversation was going nowhere. Tyler was happily preparing to go out, and Hillary, holding the child, cheerfully followed him. Then we'll go check out fridges and washing machines. If we find good ones, we'll note the models and go buy them together next time. See you later. Appalled that they even expected us to buy those, I saw their outing as an opportunity. I quickly called Scott and reiterated how hopeless the situation with our son and his wife was. Scott, sighing deeply, said we should move as soon as possible. Tyler and Hillary returned late that night, seemingly drunk and not at all ready to listen. Despite my repeated statements about not living together, they were utterly convinced we could cohabit in the new house, discussing the layout and where to place appliances. The next day, they went out to look at beds at a large furniture store. I took the chance to throw all their belongings into a rented storage unit and left the key in the mailbox at our house. I left a note and sent emails to both of them, then locked up the house and left. It was 3 days later when Tyler called me. "Hey, Mom, what's going on?" I could hear confused men in the background. "Where's the 400-yard house? Why is there only this tiny shack here?" At those words, I realized he was far too slow to catch on. "What do you mean?" "That's all that's there. I've told you many times, haven't I? That house isn't meant for a family to live in." Tyler continued to yell, but his anger gradually faded. I had repeatedly, again and again, informed Tyler and Hillary. They must have disregarded it as jest until they went there, saw the house themselves, and realized the truth. But, if that's the case, why did you buy such a large plot of land? Oh, are you going to rebuild here? If so, you should have said that from the start. No, that's not it. You looked at the registry documents yourself, didn't you understand? They included the will and other documents, didn't they? That land wasn't bought, it was inherited from Grandpa. I could tell that my son was speechless on the other end of the phone. I sighed and pressed my fingers against my forehead. Despite how many times we've discussed this, he really hadn't been listening. The land was meant for a family garden, and the only things nearby are a shed for farm tools and a small cabin with just enough facilities to sleep and bathe. It had been untouched during my father's illness, so by now, it must be overgrown with weeds. More importantly, I continued, if you saw the registry documents, it should have been clearly stated. That land is only 120 yard. The vast land you're seeing, most of that is someone else's field. So don't go doing anything you shouldn't. So, the very idea of a 400-yard house was wrong from the start. After being silent for a while, my son suddenly started shouting. "This is a scam. Mom, you tricked us. We don't even have a house to live in now, take responsibility. Stop saying foolish things. How many times have I told you, we can't live together anymore? It's not like I threw you out overnight, right? We've discussed this many times since Grandpa died. And I've repeatedly clarified your misunderstandings. You two just ran with it without listening." As we yelled at each other, there was a rustling noise. Then I could hear Hillary's angry voice. "We didn't hear any of this. It's terrible to deceive us and kick us out. The child is still small, what about our lives? If you're moving out of that house and not living here either, that means you have another place to live, right? Tell us immediately, we'll live together. I've told you, it's impossible. I absolutely refuse to live together with you any longer. You're grown adults, with a child no less. Start taking responsibility for your own lives." Then, my son's voice boomed again. "Dad." Put Dad on the phone. I've been listening the whole time. I'll say it too, I can't live with you any longer either. If we're around, you just shout and do nothing for yourselves. So, I won't tell you where the new house is, and we won't support you anymore. Even if we can't see our grandchild, please, just let us be free. My husband's strained voice came through, and I could tell that Tyler was holding his breath. I gently patted my husband's shoulder and spoke to my son. "Let me say this again, we won't see you guys anymore. Now, you two need to properly raise Max. And you, start by keeping a stable job. Take care of yourselves and stay healthy." "Wait, Mom. Before he could finish his sentence, I moved my finger to the end call button on my smartphone. Then, I heard Hillary scream through the phone. Unbelievable, unbelievable. What are we going to do about our future? You haven't been working, but it was okay, because your parents were there. What are we going to do on our own now? If you had properly checked the documents, none of this would have happened. Huh? Don't blame this all on me. You were happy about the 400-yard house too. Besides, you haven't been working at all. Don't just complain to me. Hearing the couple's argument, I grew worried about my grandchild. But my husband reached out and pressed the end call button for me. Looking at the now silent phone, we both sighed deeply. My husband had tried to support them, feeling responsible for having spoiled our son. But it was to no avail. Honestly, it wasn't entirely my husband's fault. He spoiled our son when he was young, but at least during college and right after graduation. Our son still kept in touch and communicated properly. The problem started when he began hopping from one job to another for no sensible reason. And fell in with internet friends who encouraged his erratic behavior. Raising a child is a parent's duty, but once he changed so drastically as an adult, there was nothing more we could do. We had endured patiently time and again, but if his wife fell into the same decline, there was nothing we could do. Months later, after accepting we no longer had a son or grandchild, I was watering the vegetables in Dad's garden when I suddenly heard a voice from behind. Turning around, I saw my haggard son. Mom, please help me. My son, who had become much thinner since the last time we met, bombarded me with words despite my silence. I got divorced from Hillary. I cheated. But it couldn't be helped, right? After that, I found an apartment, which was good, but then she only talked about work or money. She wasn't affectionate at all, and even though I told her to put our kid in daycare and work, she just said it was too hard and refused. Then, I met a really cute girl at my new job. It's not my fault, right? I was working hard for my family, but they didn't care about me. I was so astounded that I couldn't even respond. I turned off the water from the hose and started to pack up. Despite my ignoring him, Tyler continued to speak. When Hillary found out about the affair, she freaked out and wanted a divorce. She took Max with her. And now she's demanding tens of thousands for compensation and child support. It's ridiculous, right? Whose fault does she think it is that I had an affair? Come on, Mom, I don't have any savings, please, I need you to pay the compensation. Grandpa left an inheritance, right? If it's not possible, we could sell this land. At his outrageous words, my anger exploded, and I glared fiercely at him. It's always money, money. All you and Hillary ever talk about is money. Why should I cover for your mistakes? If there was another woman you wanted to be with, you should have gotten a divorce before starting anything with her. You act like you're the victim, it's pathetic. Neither your father nor I will help you out. It's tough, but a man who relies on his parents and even talks about selling their inheritance when things get tough, who would help him? What? Even though your son is going through such hard times, you don't feel anything? I do feel something. I'm devastated that the son I cared for has turned out to be such a good-for-nothing. But if I help you now, you'll just keep thinking that your parents will fix everything whenever you're in trouble. We won't be around forever, you need to learn to deal with your own messes. With that, I finished cleaning up and left the field. Tyler stubbornly followed me, but when he realized that people around us were whispering, and words like a police and a report started to be heard, he ran away crying. I immediately contacted Scott, and we agreed to be vigilant in the area for a while. However, Tyler did not return after that. It seems he's also having issues with his affair partner over compensation, and he's preoccupied. Once a year, Hillary's parents send us photos of our grandchild. From what I can tell, they are well supported by her parents, and the child appears healthy and happy in the pictures. It's a sad tale, but our lives have become much more peaceful and settled since we were freed from our son and his issues. I regret not being able to kick them out sooner due to being busy with my father and moving. All we hope for now is that our grandchild lives happily. Today, as always, I continue my life going to the family garden with Scott.